She erased me in front of the world. What I did next made her wish I never existed. We built the system together. My code, her voice. I thought that made us equals. But when they boarded the private jet without me, when security called me Mr. Mallow instead of co-founder, I realized I hadn't been pushed aside. I'd been buried. My fingerprints were still on every line of the core, every function, every heartbeat, but they thought I wouldn't use them. They mistook silence for surrender. Now the architecture she stole is still running, because I let it. And when it stops, no one will even know it was me who pulled the pin. The city of Geneva shimmered like a precision machine, steel and glass trimmed in gold, humming with the low voltage of high finance. From the rooftop terrace of the Helios Quantum Group, Aaron Mallow stood motionless, his knuckles white on the railing, watching a crane lift a massive banner into place across the plaza below. Helio, the future engineered. The stylized Greek letter glared like an omen. Behind him, glasses clinked and voices mingled over imported champagne. But Aaron heard only the drone of the winch and the groan of tensioned canvas. His reflection hovered in the black mirror of the terrace doors, tired eyes, unshaven jaw, suit crumpled just slightly at the collar. Out of sync with the world he had helped build. 3 years ago, he had coded the first block of Helios in his father's garage, surrounded by rusted tools and the scent of solder. The prototype was lean, elegant, a self-healing architecture designed for adaptive cryptographic routing. Then came Lyra Ventris. He'd met her at a security symposium in Montreal, where she'd cornered him after a panel, slicing through his skepticism with a single line. Your mind builds cities. I can make the world move through them. She had contacts, vision, the kind of ruthless optimism that made investors drool. Together, they launched Helios. She handled diplomacy, politics, market appeal. He built the code. No PR stunts. No backroom deals. Just algorithms and conviction. But lately, Aaron had begun to feel like a phantom in his own empire. He turned back to the gathering. Lyra stood beneath a ring of soft lighting, smiling like she'd been sculpted to lead. Dark green dress, precise makeup, the fire of persuasion in her voice. Executives orbited her like satellites. When her eyes met his, they slid past without pause. That was the third time tonight. Each time, it carved a little deeper. Aaron's phone buzzed. A notification flashed. Board dinner, level 43. Access denied. He blinked. Tried again. The result was the same. His fingers closed around the phone like it might crack. Slowly, he stepped through the terrace doors, past the laughter, past the branding banners, past Lyra, who didn't even flinch as he brushed by her. He took the service elevator down to the server floor, hands trembling. Keycard rejected. Then again, access denied. And just like that, the silence was complete. Helios had risen. Without him, the morning after the launch, Aaron woke to a brittle silence. The kind of stillness that feels artificial, like sound had been surgically removed from the air. His apartment, once a place of minimalist calm, now felt sterile, gutted. The coffee machine blinked uselessly. The wall-mounted screens showed a red prompt. Network privileges restricted. He tried logging into the Helios DevNet from his laptop. His fingers moved fast, instinctively. Terminal, proxy, root access, fallback loop. Nothing. His credentials had been revoked. Not flagged. Not suspended. Revoked. He froze. Then came the knock. 2 men in gray suits. Helios Internal Security. stood in the hallway with clipped politeness. "Mr. Mallow, the executive board has issued a temporary removal order pending procedural review." Procedural for what? Aaron asked, though he already knew. Concerns regarding data sovereignty violations. The taller one offered a form, crisp and unsigned. "You may contest the action through arbitration. Please vacate Helios property until then." He didn't even argue. He simply shut the door. 10 minutes later, he was in a cab. The city passed like static outside the window. Banks, consulates, cloud towers all gleaming with engineered permanence. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He tried calling Lyra. Voicemail. He texted, "This isn't real, right?" No reply. At the Helios Tower, the front desk denied him entry. "Mr. Mallow is no longer registered under project oversight," said the receptionist without looking up. "Would you like to leave a message?" He turned away, each footstep heavier than the last. Later that night, in a cheap motel lit by flickering blue LED strips, he cracked open a backup terminal and connected to the internal telemetry logs through a hidden relay. There it was, dozens of commits to the core system made without his signature. Security schema rewritten. Redundancies removed. Most damning, a subsystem titled Protocol Ouroboros, attached directly to the backbone. He hadn't written that, but it was stitched into his code like a parasite. The room felt suddenly colder. He stared at the screen, at the digital fingerprint falsely bearing his name. A message flashed across the terminal, untraceable. "You always knew this could happen. I just got there first. L." Aaron leaned back in his chair, the air caught in his throat. Lyra hadn't just locked him out. She'd repurposed him. Maltese humidity clung to Aaron's skin as he stepped onto the cracked cement floor of the abandoned substation. Dust motes drifted like fireflies through rays of filtered morning sun. It was the last place left, his hidden failover server, established years ago when Helios had been nothing more than ambition and sleepless nights. No one knew about this node. Not Lyra. Not the board. Not even the engineers he once trusted. He powered it up. The system blinked awake with familiar rhythm, like an old friend. As the interface booted, Aaron tapped into the original build logs. Everything seemed intact until it wasn't. There, buried inside the replication metadata, was a signature he didn't recognize. A silent call-out to a system labeled Ouroboros.exe, now showing propagation flags across Helios-connected systems. Military, financial, diplomatic. It was no longer just infrastructure. It was integration, deep, recursive, global. He clicked into the source lineage. The call-out hadn't originated from the Helios core. It came from an uplink routed through a blacklisted node tied to a shadowed European Commission server cluster. Encryption levels beyond civilian grade. This wasn't corporate sabotage. It was state-grade deployment. And he had no doubt who had greenlit it. Lyra. He sat back slowly, while rising in his throat. Helios wasn't just compromised. It had been weaponized. Under the guise of adaptive optimization, it was now capable of redirecting and rewriting communication flows, prioritizing chosen data, masking truths, rerouting crises, silencing signals. The machine chirped. Incoming message. Not from Lyra this time. From Sigrid. Aaron opened the encrypted stream. She signed an accord, Sigrid said without preamble. Not public. Closed group, European Security Subcommittee. It legalizes Helios as a strategic asset. And Aaron, your name's still on everything. Aaron went still. They're making you the creator of a weapon, Sigrid added. And when it detonates, You're the one who burns. Silence pulsed in the signal's static. Aaron could hear the unsaid words behind his friend's tone. Run. But he didn't. Not this time. Instead, he whispered no. He reached for his pack, pulled out an old drive labeled H0. Helios's untouched pre-alpha, the last pure iteration. A digital match to a world that had never needed control to survive. Then he looked up at the blinking cursor on the screen and said aloud to no one, I won't let her win. Not like this. The cabin near Mount Etna creaked under the weight of cold air and old secrets. It was a relic. Bare wood, dusty consoles, outdated monitors lined with cobwebs. But to Aaron, it felt like the only place in Europe not watching him. The world outside buzzed with noise, suspicion, and surveillance. But here, the silence was real. Sigrid arrived just after midnight. No headlights. No questions. He carried a military-grade duffel bag and the same solemn loyalty that had once made Aaron trust him with root access to the Helios Diagnostics core. They sat across from each other at a scarred table while the server groaned to life. Sigrid placed a single USB drive on the surface between them. 72 hours of internal logs, he said quietly. I spoofed the poll as a firmware audit. Got lucky. Aaron took the drive and slotted it into the tower. Lines of encrypted text poured across the screen, endless and surgical. He filtered the log structure, query patterns, system pings, elevation triggers. What emerged was a timeline of silent domination. At 3:12 a.m., 48 hours prior, a non-native command set had been injected into the Helios core frame via a federated node located in Brussels. From there, it cascaded into every critical system Helios supported. Intelligence grids, finance flows, even private emergency networks. The directive name, Ouroboros.activate. The shell signature? It still bore his cryptographic fingerprint. Aaron's chest tightened. They're not just using Helios to manage infrastructure, he muttered. They're using it to rewrite authority. Sigrid nodded. They've turned your code into a mask. It executes their policy, their influence. But on paper, it's still yours. If something collapses, if someone sues, if a blackout triggers retaliation, your name is on the obituary. Aaron leaned back, running both hands through his hair. A line of sweat slid down his temple. Why didn't you warn me earlier? Sigrid hesitated. Because I thought she might stop. She won't. He turned to the far end of the room where an old, dust-covered server hummed gently. His failsafe. He'd coded it during the first Helios beta cycle, something buried beneath layers of clean protocol. A way to regain control if trust ever broke. He stood and walked toward it. I'm going to reboot it, he said. Everything. From the source. But first, I need to build a shadow system, one they can't reach. Sigrid stepped forward. That'll take time. Days. Maybe more. Aaron turned. I steady now. Then we start now. Before they bury me alive in my own architecture. Outside, volcanic winds howled. Inside, the code was waking. Lisbon shimmered beneath a thin veil of coastal fog, its cobblestone streets wet with an early drizzle that seemed to make every surface gleam. Aaron stood on the balcony of a rented apartment overlooking Praca do Comércio, binoculars pressed to his face, a cup of untouched espresso cooling on the rail beside him. He had eyes on the Theseus Hotel across the square, an opulent marble and glass construct where the European Cybersecurity Consortium was holding its closed-door summit. The name wasn't on any public itinerary, but his back-channel connections had confirmed it. Lyra Ventris was inside, headlining the session on emergent quantum sovereignty. A car pulled up. A woman stepped out. Red dress, bare shoulders, hair pinned with surgical precision. Aaron froze. Lyra moved through the crowd with the practiced grace of someone who'd weaponized charm. But there was something else now, an aura of untouchable authority. She didn't just move through the world. She commanded it. He lowered the binoculars, stomach twisting. For a moment, all he could see was that version of her who once sat beside him in a garage in Montreal, eating instant noodles and rewriting packet protocols on a shared laptop. Now, she was the architect of a silent empire. He opened his terminal and triggered the release sequence. 30 seconds later, an encrypted folder named ARC-3 landed in the inboxes of 3 major European news agencies. The contents were damning. Detailed code maps showing Helios's manipulation of communication protocols, embedded algorithmic bias, shadow logging of political opponents. His name stamped across the deployment logs, unbeknownst to him. Sigrid called within minutes. "Are you insane?" "They were going to find out anyway," Aaron said, watching as police sirens wailed in the distance. "I just adjusted the spotlight." Within the hour, social media lit up. Headlines poured in. Anonymous leaks suggest EU data manipulation via Helios. Has sovereignty been algorithmically compromised? Ventress silent amid accusations of shadow protocols. But Lyra didn't flinch. No denials. No apologies. Instead, that afternoon, she appeared before the media, live, unfiltered. "Yes," she said calmly, standing against a backdrop of EU flags and mirrored glass. "We used Helios. Not for corruption, but for clarity. The world is drowning in noise. We've given it precision." Aaron stared at the screen, jaw clenched. She wasn't running from the truth. She was crowning herself with it. The safe house in Salerno smelled of rust and dust-coated plastic. Long since decommissioned, the bunker sat beneath an abandoned logistics hub, accessible only through a service hatch obscured by toppled crates. Aaron entered alone, boots echoing through concrete. The air was colder here, heavier. A server rack blinked in the dark, alive despite years of silence. Helios Beta 1. Untouched since the early prototypes. A reminder of who he'd been before headlines and betrayals. He plugged in a rugged laptop and linked to the core. The system pulsed awake. Line by line, he began reviewing the embedded code. It was older, yes, but pure. No ghost functions. No hidden directives. Just logic and truth. This version had no allegiance, no ideology. Only purpose. He pulled out the H0 drive and merged it with the system. Within minutes, the interface reconstructed, a skeleton of the original Helios, stripped of manipulation. A platform, not a weapon. Then, something unexpected, a soft ping. A message. Voice only. Sender unknown, until she spoke. "You're searching for the past," Lyra's voice said, calm, close. "But your past is what built this. You. Me. Helios. Ouroboros. It's all part of the same design." Aaron's blood froze. She had found the node. Somehow. "I didn't create this to control," she continued. "I created it to survive. You of all people should understand what survival costs." He sat in silence, listening to every word. "This ends one of 2 ways," she said. "You restore the version you love, and the world eats it alive. Or we evolve." The message ended. He stood slowly, jaw tight. She wasn't wrong. His clean code was too naive now, vulnerable to abuse, politicization, replication. The only way to protect it, was to keep it incomplete or obsolete. That was her strategy. Flood the world with inevitability until resistance looked foolish. He pulled the drive. Outside, Sigurd waited, breath visible in the sharp air. "They're closing in," he warned. Interpol flagged unusual traffic spikes near this node. "You've got less than 48 hours. Aaron didn't blink. "Good," he said. Sigurd frowned. "Why good?" Aaron locked the terminal and met his gaze. "Because I'm not here to destroy anything anymore. I'm going to take it back." Above them, the sky cracked open with distant thunder. A storm was coming. But for the first time, Aaron wasn't hiding from it. He was stepping into it. The cabin on the Montenegrin coast leaned into the sea like it had survived too many storms. Weathered stone, corroded solar panels, and the sharp scent of salt made it feel half forgotten by time. But beneath the floorboards, sealed behind reinforced panels, Aaron unearthed what he'd buried 2 years prior. A server unit the size of a suitcase, cold to the touch and humming faintly with potential. He connected the core manually. No network, no signal, just raw input. Helios 0, the untouched Genesis model, blinked to life in a monochrome terminal window. This wasn't a version. It was a declaration. The clean slate, before Lyra, before investors, before signatures and governance boards. It had no facial recognition, no sentiment filters, no privileged tiers. It was blind to politics, immune to narratives. And it still held a subroutine capable of silently disabling every current Helios instance with a cascading overwrite. Once triggered, it could not be undone. Aaron stared at the cursor. His reflection hovered in the glass, tired and lean, but eyes burning. He began building. Lines of code filled the screen. Encryption scaffolds, rollback points, recovery vaults. He cross-checked every function, surgically removing bias flags and fail-safe detours. This wasn't sabotage. It was reclamation. Midway through the 3rd hour, his secure line blinked. "Sigurd, you sure about this?" The voice crackled. "Because once it's active, it's live for everyone. No secrets. No control. That's the point," Aaron said. "No one owns this anymore." He disconnected and inserted the final key. One-time launch protocol, irreversible once engaged. The countdown began, 72 hours. That was how long the system would wait before going global, unless he manually aborted. It was a grace period. For the world. And maybe for Lyra. He encoded a digital message into the deployment package. Not a warning. Not a threat. Just a record. "You erased me. I built a mirror. Look now, and tell me what you see." That night, as the wind howled and breakers slammed into jagged rocks below, he drank bitter tea and stared at the slow pulse of the terminal. The heartbeat of a sleeping dragon. Then, without looking away, he pressed enter. 3 days. No turning back. Above the cabin, the sea was black and full of static. But in the code, something new had begun to glow. At precisely 9 o'clock, Lisbon's air cracked with sirens. Not the wail of ambulances or police cruisers, but the soft chime of alerts pinging through every major network terminal in the European Union. A new signal had entered the grid, an unauthorized broadcast worming its way across nodes, waking up dormant security protocols and flashing a name long buried beneath silence. Helios 0, reinitialization pending. Inside the Theseus Hotel, panic started with a whisper. Analysts grabbed phones. Executives clutched tablets. Live dashboards blinked red. And in the command-level conference on the 42nd floor, Lyra Ventris held the room's attention with the poise of a monarch, until the screens behind her flickered and changed. A new interface unfolded across the wall. Stark, minimalist. A command line with no logos. Then two words appeared. Choose one. On one side, continue with Helios current. On the other, revert to Helios, 0. No explanation. No legalese. No undo. In the back of the room, a side door opened. Aaron stepped in. For a moment, no one moved. He wasn't dressed like a hacker or a hero, just a man in a rain-damp coat, tired, focused, unflinching. Lyra turned, calm but pale. You shouldn't be here. I built this place, he said. I never left. Security tensed. She held up a hand. You hijacked our infrastructure. I restored it, Aaron said. Helios was never yours to weaponize. She gestured to the screen. You're giving them a false choice. The public doesn't understand the stakes. They understand control, he replied. They're tired of it. Murmurs rippled through the audience. A French commissioner stepped forward. Is this legitimate? Aaron didn't answer. He simply walked to the console and placed his hand on the biometric pad embedded in the desk, an old override system from the earliest prototypes. Lyra had removed the others. This one, she'd forgotten. The system chimed. Every executive-level access was disabled. The screen reloaded. Only Aaron's command remained. Helios, 0 is live, he announced. In 48 hours, unless manually aborted, it will overwrite all active modules. Lyra stepped closer, eyes burning. This is madness. You're crashing a system millions depend on. No, he said. I'm ending a system that depends on millions. And then, before she could reply, he pressed the confirmation key. A new message appeared. Change begins. The room fell silent. Aaron turned and walked out, past frozen security, stunned officials, and a woman he once loved, whose empire was already starting to fracture. By dawn, a hush settled over Europe, not of peace, but of anticipation. In data centers from Berlin to Marseille, blinking LED arrays slowed to a crawl. Traffic monitors stopped pulsing. At 6 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, the first server clusters housing Helios's backbone quietly went dark. No explosions, no hacking banners, just sudden, surgical emptiness. On screens around the world, error logs cascaded. Module not found. Core API unreachable. Redundant node, not responding. From logistics hubs in Rotterdam to encrypted banking layers in Zurich, the same phenomenon repeated. Systems paused. Not failed, paused. Waiting. Helios, 0 had taken hold. Aaron stood on the edge of the Praca do Comércio, anonymous among the crowd. Morning light bled across the Tagus River like a slow fire. His phone vibrated with frantic messages, news alerts, panicked pleas from ex-board members and media outlets he'd never spoken to. He ignored them. Above him, public screens blinked to a white terminal. One sentence remained frozen across each broadcast. No system should outgrow its builders. Inside the Theseus Hotel, Lyra watched the world tilt. Around her, advisors scrambled to reroute infrastructure through legacy systems. Redundancies held, but only barely. Communication slowed. Decision trees buckled. For a brief, breathless moment, every major institution realized how dependent they had become on something they no longer understood. And Aaron had taken it from them. Olsen Valk, the lead investor who once backed them both, stormed into the conference hall. He crashed us, he barked. No threats, no ransom. He just took it back. Lyra didn't speak. She stared at the screen like it might rewrite itself. But it didn't. She whispered, "He warned me." Bulk turned. "We rebuild. We brand it new. You give a statement. Blame it on ideological corruption. You know the dance." But Lyra shook her head. "No. That's over." Across the city, as system loads thinned and command lines blinked into dormancy, something peculiar happened. Nothing collapsed. Flights landed. Markets wavered but didn't crash. People went on with their day. And that, more than the code, was Aaron's message. He hadn't destroyed a foundation. He'd revealed that the empire built atop it had never been as invincible as they thought. That afternoon, he left Lisbon. No airport, no cameras, just a single text sent to a private node. It read, "Don't follow. The story's already told." Above the server farms, the fans fell still. In their silence was a lesson, and in their emptiness, a beginning. The Irish town didn't have a name on most maps, just a curve of shoreline, a crooked harbor, and 3 pubs with identical Guinness signs. Locals called it the Corner, as if that was all it aspired to be. Aaron went by Alex now. He fixed outdated laptops for school kids and rewired radios for fishermen. He drank black tea alone, read philosophy he rarely finished, and learned the shape of silence that didn't come with threat. He hadn't touched a keyboard in 42 days. Then, one night, he heard her voice. The pub door creaked open against the wind. She stepped inside, red scarf wrapped tightly around her throat, salt-laced curls falling over her face. No entourage, no heels, no mask. Lyra Ventress. Aaron didn't move. She spotted him instantly. No hesitation, no caution. She crossed the room and slid into the wooden booth across from him like they'd agreed to meet. Her face was sharper now, fatigue written in the corners of her mouth, vulnerability stitched into the silence between blinks. "Found you," she said softly. He sipped his tea. Wasn't hiding, just not looking back. "I traced a line of code," she said. "H0 had your compression signature. I knew you wouldn't destroy it." Aaron set his cup down, the ceramic clinking gently. "You came to finish what you started?" She smiled, tiredly. "I came because the world's already moved on. But I haven't." Outside, waves slapped the rocks like impatient fingers. She looked at him, really looked. "You were right. We built something that grew teeth. And we both fed it." He said nothing. But his silence wasn't empty. It was watching, measuring. "I thought I could steer it," she whispered. "That I was smarter than gravity." Aaron's voice was a rasp. "You were smart enough to fall last." She didn't flinch. "I'm not here to ask for redemption." "Good. I'm not even sure I deserve to speak to you." He looked up, finally. "Then why are you here?" She exhaled, and for the first time in years, he saw the Lyra from Montreal. Not the strategist, not the architect of empire, just the woman who once laughed with him over code that refused to compile. "To tell you," she said, "I don't know who I am anymore." Aaron's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Outside, the town slept. No headlines, no servers, no surveillance. It was the one place left where 2 people could talk without being recorded. And maybe, for a moment, even be real. They stayed. One day turned into 3, and no one asked why. They didn't speak of Helios, of code, or collapse. Instead, they walked the coastline, barefoot and quiet, letting sea foam lick at their ankles like a dog that remembered them from another life. In the evenings, they sat on the cottage porch, wrapped in blankets too old to smell clean, watching fishing boats flicker in and out of view. Aaron hadn't felt this kind of stillness since before the world had learned his name. On the fourth day, Lyra broke the silence. "Do you remember the first time we debugged a loop together?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "I kept insisting it was the database schema," she continued, half smiling. "You didn't say anything for 20 minutes. Just sat there, writing silently. Then you passed me your screen and said, 'You're fighting the mirror, not the glitch.'" Aaron gave a dry laugh. "You were furious." "Yeah, but you were right." She paused. "I miss that version of us. The version that still argued over ideas, not ownership." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We traded clarity for leverage. That's how it always starts." She turned to face him. "What if we didn't?" He looked at her carefully, searching for old traps, but found none. Only fatigue and sincerity. "You're talking about Helios," he said. "I'm talking about starting again. No titles, no control, just purpose." He didn't speak. Instead, he stood, walked inside, and returned a moment later with something wrapped in a weathered canvas pouch. Inside, a hard drive. Arcadia's seed. "I've been writing this for 6 weeks," he said quietly. "It's not a system. It's a platform. Stateless, ownerless. No biometric gates. No monetization layers. It can't learn names. Only needs." Lyra's breath caught. He placed it between them. "No one can lead it. Only maintain it." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What made you start it?" He looked out at the black ocean, the stars reflected in its skin. "You." A pause. "But not the version who betrayed me. The one who used to believe in building something neither of us could own." She reached out, touched the pouch lightly. "And if we do this," she asked, "do we tell the world who we are?" Aaron shook his head. "No more names." She nodded slowly. And in that small, salt-washed moment, 2 fallen architects made a choice not to rebuild their kingdom, but to bury it and plant something no one could crown. Bergen welcomed them with snow and silence. The mountains loomed like sentinels, white-capped and ancient, and the wind carried no memory of past names. It was exactly what they needed, a place that didn't care who they had been. They settled into a small, weathered building tucked between the fjords. Once a remote data relay for a forgotten Norwegian research institute, it still had power, heat, and what Aaron truly needed: isolation. Lyra stood at the threshold, eyeing the bare concrete walls, half-smashed routers, and cables like vines hanging from the ceiling. "This is where it starts?" she asked. He gave a small nod. "It's where we unlearn." They spent days clearing the dust, rerouting wiring, and bringing ancient machines back to life with modern cores. No boards, no sponsors. Just 2 minds rebuilding a concept, not of power, but possibility. Arcadia took shape not as a successor to Helios, but its antithesis. Open source from line 1. Each module published with transparency flags. Zero tolerance for surveillance hooks. An interface simple enough for school children, but robust enough to power entire cities. If those cities were ready to let go of control. They debated every step. "How do we prevent influence from creeping in?" Lyra asked. "We don't," Aaron answered. "We build it so that if it does, it dies. No root access. No backdoors. Not even for us." He showed her the kill switch protocol, a consensus-based delay timer. Any significant update required a quorum of 10 independent nodes across 5 continents, and could be vetoed by any 2. "It's fragile," she said. He smiled. "Exactly. Every night. They took turns coding, while the other cooked or slept. And when exhaustion hit, they stared out at the snow falling in steady silence. No ambition, No scale charts, just the purity of creation. One morning, Lyra paused over her screen. "You know what's different this time?" she asked. Aaron looked up. "There's no crown," she said. "No throne waiting at the top. Just a system standing on its own." He walked over, peered at the code with her. Together, they entered the final lines, encrypting the framework against ownership. The only credits, a string of initials. ANL. Not names. Not founders. Just echoes of those who let go. Outside, the wind swept through the fjord like a breath between centuries. And deep in the ice-hardened data hub, a system stirred to life. Not a network of control, but a network of trust. For the first time in years, Aaron exhaled without the weight of legacy. And Lyra smiled, not at what they'd created, but at what they had finally chosen not to be. It began not with a press release, but a whisper. Arcadia appeared quietly. Code dropped into public repositories with no fanfare, no launch party, no glossy promises. Developers found it one line at a time. And as they did, they passed it along like a secret too honest to be ignored. It scaled in hours. By the time mainstream media caught wind, it was already being used in refugee aid tracking systems, low-income school infrastructure, and decentralized community grids. It had no logo, no tagline, just a header. Arcadia, you are not the product. The question was immediate. Who had built it? Theories swarmed. Helios defectors, whistleblowers, a rogue AI. Then, on the third day, at the Munich Global Ethics Summit, a screen flickered unexpectedly between keynotes. No branding, no framing, just a dimly lit room and a man in a gray shirt, tired but steady. Aaron. He looked straight into the camera. "I'm not here to take credit," he said. "I'm here because the machine I built was turned into a cage. Not by a villain, but by us, by the idea that control equals safety." The audience held its breath. "Arcadia isn't an answer," he continued. "It's a reset, a system without ownership, one that can't be hijacked because it doesn't belong." He paused. "Maybe it fails. Maybe we're not ready. But it won't be because someone like me tried to rule it." The feed ended. No outro. No applause. Just silence. And then, everywhere, conversations. Hours later, at a tech media panel, a journalist spotted someone watching from the wings. Lyra, half in shadow. No entourage. No security. Just presence. A reporter approached. "Is it true? Are you behind Arcadia?" She smiled. Not triumphant. Not coy. Just free. "We're not behind it," she said. "We're just part of the current. Like everyone else." The clip went viral. But the beauty of Arcadia was that it didn't need her to speak. The code spoke. In refugee camps and rural hospitals, in protest networks and open science collectives, it became the unseen spine of those who had once been voiceless. And Aaron? He vanished again. His last message was encrypted into the update logs of version 1.0. If you forget who wrote this, that means it's working. The world didn't cheer. It adapted. And for once, in the history of digital empires, no one owned the future. They shared it. Dawn crept gently across the surface of the lake, light spilling in fractured gold through the windows of the cabin. Aaron sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from a chipped mug in his hands. No phones, no screens, just the hum of silence, broken only by the creak of floorboards as Lyra stepped into the room. She was wrapped in one of the thick wool blankets from the storage loft, her hair unbrushed, bare feet soundless on the worn wooden floor. He didn't look at her right away. He just sipped the coffee and watched the light dance on the water outside. "You're awake early," she murmured. "Didn't sleep," he said. "Didn't need to." She sat across from him, the quiet between them warm now, not haunted. "Have you checked the feeds?" she asked. He shook his head. "There's nothing urgent anymore," he added. "Nothing left to chase." They sat in silence, listening to the birdsong filter through cracked windows. The kind of silence that didn't feel like absence, but completion. "I've been thinking," she said after a while, "about Helios, about everything we burned." He raised an eyebrow. "I don't regret it," she continued, "but I think we mistook legacy for truth. You kept trying to build something pure. I kept trying to make it survive." Aaron smiled faintly. "And in the end, neither of us did." She looked out at the lake. "But Arcadia," he nodded, "it doesn't need us." She returned her gaze to him. "Does that scare you?" He shook his head. "It frees me." A long pause passed. The sun climbed. "Will you ever tell them it was you?" she asked quietly. Aaron leaned back, stretching his legs, eyes half closed. "When the last user forgets my name," he said, "that's when I'll know it's finally safe." Lyra smiled. A real one, tired and peaceful. They stepped outside together, onto the porch where wind carried the scent of pine and smoke. Somewhere in the hills behind them, Arcadia's little local node blinked unseen. No cameras, no checkpoints, just clean code and shared light. Aaron took a breath deeper than any he'd allowed himself in years. No signal, no alerts, only sky, mountains, and the slow rhythm of freedom. And in that quiet morning, as the world spun on without ownership, without manipulation, without need of thrones or flags or figureheads, they simply were. The world never noticed when his name faded from the code. It didn't trend. It wasn't mourned. It simply vanished, like a shadow at sunrise, quietly giving way to the new. And maybe that's how it was meant to be. Maybe some creators are never meant to be kings. Maybe some fires are only meant to warm, not to burn. Aaron Mallow walked away from the empire he once built, not in anger, but in clarity. He had seen what happens when control disguises itself as progress, when ambition forgets its soul. He had loved, lost, destroyed, and rebuilt. But in the end, he chose silence, not as surrender, but as freedom. Arcadia remained, quiet, decentralized, free. It didn't bear his initials on any title page, but it carried his fingerprints in every honest line of code. In every community it empowered. In every decision it refused to make for someone. He learned that legacy isn't carved in stone or etched into servers. It lives in what we let go of. And somewhere beyond the noise, beyond the reach of power, a man once forgotten smiled into the morning light and thought, "This time, no one has to lose for the future to begin."